You're listening to episode 113, Amy's Story, a son with Craniopharyngioma. Hello, my friends. I hope you are doing well today. I am so happy to be able to share with you Amy's story. It's been one that I have been wanting to share for a long time. I think we interviewed at the very beginning of the year or the end of last year, so I'm so ready to be able to share her story with you. Her son had a brain tumor, and it wasn't something that they knew about until she kind of looked at his eye one morning and was able to discover that something was different. And it really has evolved into not just a brain tumor, but we know the brain has a lot of jobs, and so it's affected a lot of his everyday life. So Amy is an incredible mom. She shares their story so beautifully, and her ultimate goal is to support other parents going through similar things. So I'm so honored to have her on the podcast today. One of the most influential things she wrote to me was, "The grief is ongoing. The grief of losing a healthy child that seemed to have such a bright future to this tumor, while feeling grateful that he is alive and with us, and how both of those things live at once." So that's just a little taste of Amy. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our conversation. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
So my family's from Ocean City, Maryland, which is the coastal resort town that's just in the middle of Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia. So it's a pretty busy area in the summer, a little quieter in the winter. And it's just, our family's just my husband, Sean, and our son, Alex, who is now 11 years old. And Alex is a 6.5-year brain tumor survivor.
Wow. Okay. So you're from the Northeast, which means I'm just trying to think about accessible to children's hospitals when you're put in the position that you're in.
Sure.
So you've got a few around you. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're a couple hours away, but we're kind of situated in between. We have access to Children's National in DC, Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Okay.
So all of them are about 2.5 hours away. So we're really lucky in that we sort of sit in the middle of 3 really amazing hospitals.
Yeah, that's always nice when you have to go get that second opinion, or you want to reach out to someone else, and it's just a drive away. That can be really helpful.
Yeah, the downside is just we do have a fair amount of emergency situations.
Yeah.
Luckily, not so many in the last year, I think mostly because of being in lockdown.
Right.
But so in a joking way, we've had a few frequent flyer miles with the local helicopter in getting to the hospitals. But at least we have these hospitals that are accessible to us. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the kind of diagnosis and finding out that something was wrong, and what that was like for you and your son?
Sure. So my son was typically neurotypical, no real indication that anything was wrong leading up to the event. So it was one Thursday in May in 2015, right before Memorial Day weekend. And we woke up that day, business as usual. It had been a little bit of a tough week. My grandmother had been put into hospice care. So we were in Baltimore the day before to say our goodbyes, and had gotten back that night. So we were all very involved with that week. And so that Thursday morning, I woke up with my son, Alex, and he was 4, and, always excited about his day. I was excited because it was a library day at pre-K. And I looked at him and I thought, something looks key with his eye. So his left eye was crossing a little bit inward. And I thought that's really weird, but my whole family has lazy eye.
Mm.
So I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe in all of this craziness, this is something that developed and I didn't notice. So I sent him to school and made an eye, nothing else seemed wrong. So I sent him to school. I made an eye doctor appointment and his teacher contacted me. She knew I was on my email all the time through my work. And she emailed me and she said, have you noticed Alex's eye? And I said, yeah, I made an eye doctor appointment. I emailed her back. And then she emailed me and she said, he seems to be walking unsteady. So I thought, well, that's really weird. So I called the pediatrician and they said, bring him in this afternoon. So I went and got him from school and we went over to the pediatrician's office. And his pediatrician, who now we adore and we're friends, this was the first time we've seen this particular doctor. And he looked at Alex and he said, I want you to go get in the car and drive to either Johns Hopkins or Children's National, whichever one you want to get to. I think it's a brain tumor or brain cancer. Wow. And even like when I remember this, it was like an out of body experience because I was like, what is he talking about? Right. And, and so I was like, okay. And I mean, everybody, I saw as we were walking out of the office, the whole staff was just like still and sort of, it was just the weirdest feeling. So we got in the car and we drove up to Johns Hopkins. My family is from Baltimore, so it seems to be the natural pick. And got to the ER and they put him in an ultra-fast MRI. We were terrified. Like, I can't even describe. I've never felt fear like this. And trying to keep him still in the MRI, it was just the whole thing. And then we, after the MRI, we were waiting in the room in the ED, and this is just an interesting side story, but it's always stayed in my mind. The doctor that was kind of talking with us prior comes in, she's putting her coat on, and she was young, probably, just a fellow, and she's putting her coat on and she says, I'm leaving someone else will be with you. They found something on the MRI, so someone will be talking with you shortly. So my husband and I looked at each other and were, what did she just say? What does that mean? And my husband looks and says to the nurse, is he going to die? And the nurse who had overheard this ran and got another doctor. Another doctor took us into a room. And so that person that kind of, delivered the news and rolled out is always kind of forever engraved in my brain.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like, this is not a put on your jacket, walk out the door, transfer care conversation.
Yes. If I ever write the book, she gets a chapter. But anyway, so they put us in a room and they explained to us that, they saw a mass in the middle of his brain and that there was, there was no reason to think that he was going to die at that moment, and that the neurosurgeon would be with us to talk about the plan moving forward. So that is how our Thursday began, and that was where our Thursday went that night. And so they had decided to let him go into the PICU overnight, and then they would do a long MRI. And once they did the long MRI the next morning, they said, we're going to have to put him into a surgery right away because he was having extreme hydrocephalus. And that was what was pushing on the optic nerve, causing the eye to turn inward and was pressing on other pretty fragile systems in the brain. So he went into emergency brain surgery that morning. And that pretty much was literally overnight our lives changed. It was such a just crazy time. And just waiting for him to get through surgery was probably the scariest 24 hours of our lives for sure.
I think a 4-year-old in that position, like you said, the MRI, the around people that you don't know, you can tell mom and dad are stressed. You don't totally get what's going on. How was it having to be a parent, like continuing to parent in that situation, but also trying to digest all of the information that people were giving you. It's like the multitasking is just unreal. Like you're having to compartmentalize from moment to moment.
Yeah, it was, he looked at me at one point, he looked at me and said, "Mommy, am I sick?" Like he knew something was wrong with his eye, and that's what we were concerned about. But, and he was pretty go with the flow for the most part. But then the morning of his surgery, he said, when he said, "Mommy, am I sick?" That really was a moment, because I was like, what do I say? And we didn't know what was really going to happen at that point. It was very early the morning they took him into surgery. So he also was very concerned because he was supposed to go on a field trip.
Right.
And he was, it was the kid concern. Well, am I going to get to go on my field trip? And, it was hard to kind of digest what was going on, figure out how to keep him from being scared, but not even really knowing what to tell him.
Right. Well, you have so many questions yourself, and it's like, how, if you don't have the answers, how are you supposed to give him an answer? And it's a really difficult situation to be in. But it sounds like just the trust he had in you to be able to ask the question, like, "Mommy, am I sick?" Like he really has an amazing relationship with you to ask that question.
And I have you can always find a little bit of something funny, or I strongly believe that everywhere, even in the worst moments, there's always something that can kind of bring light to it. And he had, while we were that afternoon, the day before, when we were waiting to go to the pediatrician, I had brought him home from school and we were doing an art project, and he had glitter in his hair, like glitter and stuff all in his hair. So the nurses are trying to pick off the glitter out of his hair because they're getting ready to do brain surgery, right? So we're all picking this glitter out of his hair, and I was like, it was just such a surreal moment. But it kind of brought the idea of child. It was like the childhood. Here's a child just doing his thing, and then here all of a sudden this happened.
Well, and it's like how fast it happened, like glitter one moment, surgery the next, literally.
Yeah. Wow. Literally. Mm-hmm.
So talk with us about after the surgery, and I'm guessing the team was able to give you a bit more information about what life would be like moving forward from there.
So that was the thing that was a little bit, I don't think it was actually thoroughly explained to us. And this is in my work now with the foundation, this is something that we're tackling, but we find to be a consistent situation, is that in our situation, it was an emergency. So certainly we didn't have time to really process what the tumor was about, what could be the long-term consequences. We didn't have time to seek second opinions or, really question how the tumor was going to be removed. And so we were literally just trying to figure out how to say the name of it, because somebody had said the name. It stuck in my head, but I wasn't even sure what it was. So Alex underwent surgery, and after the surgery, the brain surgeon came out to talk to us, and he said that the tumor was benign. It was easily removed. It didn't stick to anything. Apparently, this tumor can be very sticky and stick to different structures in the brain. So he said it came out pretty easily. And he seemed very confident. We felt very good about it. A nurse even said, "Oh, you'll probably be out in a week or a couple of days." So we had no reason to believe at that point we were relieved, because we thought, "Oh, great, this is just going to be a bump in the road." But just the night after surgery, as things started to unfold, we started to become aware that maybe that wasn't the case. And so Alex, for example, started losing all of his body fluid. So he was peeing out constantly. And we come to find out he had a condition called diabetes insipidus. So the surgery impacted the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. The tumor sat right between those two vital parts of the brain and body.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact of the tumor removal damaged the hypothalamus and severed the stalk, the pituitary stalk. So he was no longer making the hormone vasopressin. So vasopressin is the antidiuretic hormone that your brain releases to tell the kidneys to release water, hold water. So he started losing water, and that became a pretty significant issue that we were facing because he developed what's known as a dipsic DI. So he has no sense of thirst because of injury to his hypothalamus. So we are constantly troubleshooting his blood sodium level. And sodium, if your sodium swings high, that's hypernatremia, which is dehydration, or if it swings too low, that's hyponatremia, which means your sodium's too low. Both situations can result in seizure, can be coma, and can be fatal, which we soon learned, management was critical. However, there was no way to actually test sodium at home like you test blood sugar. So it's often confused with the diabetes we know pretty well, but it's a much rarer condition. So there was no way to test for sodium at home. So that made it really challenging. We also found out that he had complete loss of his endocrine system. So he would not be making any hormones on his own. So we'd have to replace human growth hormone so he could grow. We have to replace his thyroid hormone. And we also had to give him hydrocortisone or steroid because he no longer made cortisol. So he has adrenal insufficiency. He's unable to produce cortisol in the case of sickness or illness or injury or any sort of stress to the body. Your body releases cortisol. We hear about it all the time now to fight the stress and to protect the organs. And so if he's sick or has an injury, we have to administer a stress dose of steroids, which is sometimes through an injection. And then we also learned that he had a condition called hypothalamic obesity. So we have to monitor not only his fluid intakes because of the diabetes insipidus, but also we have to be really careful about his diet because he can so easily gain weight, which then leads to multiple other subconditions. And then so he was treated in the summer. And as we got into the winter months, he would have seizures and have to be hospitalized. And we discovered that he has temperature dysregulation that's more affected in the winter. So his body temperature can easily drop into hypothermia. And then he results in hypothermic seizures, which are really challenging because he doesn't bounce back super easily from them. So these were the things that started, especially in our first year after diagnosis, were really challenging because we were just trying to figure it all out, and things would just start to emerge. And that's the physical sort of impact to the brain, but we also have neurocognitive issues, memory issues, processing speed. So it was a lot, and it's still a lot. 6.5 years later, there are times with my husband and I look at each other and we're like, we don't know what's going on. So it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I'm listening to you speak, and it feels like thing after thing. And, when you're, especially at those beginning stages, just, and all of this is starting to emerge, how did you and your husband kind of get the courage to start advocating and ask questions and research? And how did all of that unfold for you as you're also taking care of a very sick child in the hospital?
Yeah, so it was, I guess, a little bit of a sense of control in the chaos was being able to try to learn as much as we could. I was a web designer at the time, so I always had a computer with me. I even packed it when we drove to the hospital that day when he was diagnosed. So I immediately, as soon as I learned how to spell the word craniopharyngioma, I Googled it. And obviously, when you Google, and I caution people early in their journey, you're presented with all of the possibilities and worst case scenarios. But we determined that our best course was to become as educated as we could about the condition. We sort of divided and conquered. I did a lot of the research. My husband did a lot of the hands-on things, especially in the hospital. And we really approached, especially in the hospital life situation, we got ready in the morning for rounds. We made sure we were learning about things and asking educated questions. We tried to be, and still to this day, really try to be collaborative in spirit with the medical team. And I say try to be, we are very collaborative in spirit with the medical team, and want to always work towards what's best for Alex. And that was kind of what got us through. I mean, I will tell you that Alex is a completely different person after the surgery than he was before. So we were also grieving a loss at the time, because we were grieving the loss of this person that we knew and had to get to know the new person he was. And so all of that's going on, but I feel like we got into the business of it, and that gave us a little bit of some sense of control, even if it was an illusion. But, and for example, we had to measure or track his ins and outs. So how much he peed versus how much he drank, so that we could try to come to some understanding of how his sodium was reacting. And one of the things we did is, it was funny, when the nurse told us about this condition, we assumed we could test blood sodium at home, just like people test blood sugar at home. And she said, well, no, this is a really rare condition, and that isn't, possible. So the best we can do is kind of watch what goes in and what comes out and try to make sense of that. So we began to track it, and I worked with the development team, the web development team that I work with in my work life. And we developed a really basic app so that we could track his ins and outs and calculate it, and the doctors could look at it. And so we were able to kind of put our energy into that, because Alex, especially in the first couple of months, he was not awake very much. So, it was a lot of just watching and worrying. And so this gave us something to focus on at the time.
That's so amazing that you created that. Do you still use it to this day, or have you shared it with other families?
Yeah, so that's in the work plan we started the Raymond Wood Foundation in 2017. And so developing out that app in conjunction with a medical device we supply families to test blood sodium is one of the things that is in our project list. So that app is really basic and kind of ugly right now, but our hope is that eventually we can bring it to, use for other families for sure.
That's amazing. You're an inventor, you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a figure outer, you're all of these things. I'm so impressed.
Thank you. I have always been someone who seeks just always been solutions oriented. This
Right.
one's been kind of,
Yes.
This is the biggest challenge, but we try to approach it and always see if we can find a way to solve the problem, because we know that our problem is shared. We're not the only ones facing it. So, if any of us can find some way to fix something, then we definitely want to make sure that's for the greater good, right?
Absolutely. We are sponsored by Magic Mind. I am such a coffee person. I enjoy the taste and the smell in my morning routine. But the truth is, I go beyond that 1 cup of Morning Joe, and my 2 to 3 day cup habit is expensive and not that effective in the long run. Thankfully, Magic Mind has come into my life. It's a small green shot-sized drink of all natural ingredients like adaptogens to decrease stress, nootropics to boost blood flow and cognition, and unlike regular energy drinks, Magic Mind has minimal caffeine, all of which comes from matcha. After a few days in a row of drinking Magic Mind, I notice I have less brain fog and feel more productive without an afternoon slump. You can try it and get 20% off Magic Mind by going to magicmind.co/childlife and using code CHILDLIFE. If you are looking for a way to make a child in your life smile, then you have to go to smilemakers.com and go through all of the must-have toys, stickers, and prizes for kids. You'll find everything you need to make the hospital, waiting room, or even your own living room more fun with games, crafts, and prizes for every occasion. I also have very good news for you, because when you go to smilemakers.com and type in OnCall20, you will get 20% off with no minimum order required. So stock up on bundles made specifically for hospital procedures and therapeutic play, and make these already very affordable items more affordable with On-Call 20. That's smilemakers.com and On-Call 20 for 20% off your entire order. Well, you mentioned the grieving kind of process of your child went back to surgery and came out with almost a completely different child. How did you get through those first few months? And you mentioned kind of the business side. Talk to us a bit about like the emotional toll and what path you took and what you, looking back, found out that really helped you.
I would say the first couple of months, it was so painful. And I remember coming home. I had to come home from the hospital for a couple of days just I had to get my clothes. We switched up, so my husband came back and got his clothes and things because we knew we were staying for a while. And then I came back for a day or two just to get my stuff. And I remember coming into the house and seeing, I had mentioned that we had done an art project before I took him to the doctor that Thursday afternoon. So all of that stuff was still sitting out. And I looked at it and it was the first time I'd ever felt, I hadn't really ever lost anyone in my life that, other than their expected time, a grandparent that was aging so it was almost like grieving a death because we just started to see that he wasn't going to be the same. And I still feel that grief to this day. I mean, we're so blessed to have him and he's a wonderful person and this was our path and his path. And I've learned to accept that to some degree, but I still feel that grief. And in the first couple months, I can't say that it was pretty. I certainly worried myself. I would be up, we didn't sleep. I managed to not break down very much until I think one day he was in the rehab hospital and I was talking to the person that was sort of managing the education. She started using words like IEP and accommodations and all of these things. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, this is not going away. And I think that was the moment. I had a breakdown and literally like all the people we had been working with in the rehab hospital, like started to come over. I think they were like, she's going to break. But, I don't know how, honestly, we did get through it. Sometimes I think you're just in that survival mode where you're just getting up and you're getting through the day. And there were moments where I felt like, I've got this, we'll get through it. He's going to be okay. And then there was moments where I just felt like, I felt really hopeless. Now, in looking back, and I also had this feeling back then that I just wanted to fast forward the tape. I'm old enough to remember what it's like to have a tape cassette player. And so, I wanted to fast forward the tape and it's the end, right? Because I thought the end was going to be fine or that he was going to be back to normal. And, that didn't happen. But I think now I've been on a real journey of just finding peace with it and making sure that I take time for myself and make sure that, we're caregivers and as well as parents and we're on the front lines a lot of things that people wouldn't even believe that, you're trying to troubleshoot with these conditions. But I think through all of it, one thing has been just taking time to take care of my health, make sure I, build in time. Exercise is it really something that helps me. And even in the hospital, the social worker gave me a pass to the gym that was on the campus of Johns Hopkins. And I tried to go, like a family member would come in and sit with Alex and I'd go over to the gym because I knew that was just going to help me get through. And to this day, that's one of the biggest tools I use to kind of cope with heavy feelings. And so that's, I think, and also being able to be in the position where I was able to create the foundation our family created and be able to help other families. I think that's important because in adversity, I think we all can still throw a lifeline to someone else. And that's the lesson I want Alex to kind of learn that too in his journey. So those are the things. But just from a personal perspective, I can't say that I don't grieve today. I just I've learned that's kind of part of the situation, and you grow to sort of accept it.
Thank you so much for being so honest about that, because especially in a lot of these conversations, we're talking about things that happened years ago. And so there's this kind of, looking back attitude that you can have. And, but admitting that there's still dark times, even in the present, is important, because it makes other people and parents realize that, like, you can take 10 steps forward, but there will be steps back, and that's okay. And you'll continue to go forward again.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, I think learning to work through the feelings, I mean, we're all sort of conditioned to have a, emotional reaction and want to run away from it. But sometimes just kind of sitting with it, we see that a lot now. And I think that's a really good message is to know that it's okay. And I remind myself that regular people with regular kids have it, nobody is exempt from, there's no perfection. But sometimes I will say, honestly, knowing who Alex was prior to this, one of the hardest things for me is when I see other kids that especially that knew him, or I knew were in his class, or that he associated with before this happened. That's hard, because you have dreams of how your kids are going to grow up and what they're going to do, and all of that has been sort of flipped upside down. I remember saying that I never thought, Alex will never have a problem with weight because he never ate. And I was constantly worried about him eating, and my husband's a beanpole, and I just never thought that was never going to be an issue, right? And then all of a sudden now we're going into when this comes out, we'll be past the holidays, but anytime we go into the holiday season, it's an instant struggle with making sure, he doesn't put on extra weight. Also, certain foods really drive down his system. And of course, that's all the holiday foods
right, of course,
that come around. So it's, all of those things. So it's those are everything I kind of thought or predicted or envisioned have all been turned around. But I think that it's also a little bit of, you have to let it go and kind of follow. This is the path that was determined for him, and there's a reason for it. And so I take comfort in knowing that, there's good in it, even though there's a lot of struggle.
And I imagine that finding your people, whether that's people who are parents parenting in a similar way, or just your close friends or family, and having someone to just say this stuff out loud to, like, it's not freaking fair that little Timmy from pre-K is now a star baseball player and Alex is not. Like, it's just not freaking fair. It's not. And to be able to say that out loud to someone who hears you and goes, oh no, but you have all that, it's just, no, let this be this. And it's really hard.
Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, it isn't fair. And I always say, this is 1 in a million brain tumors. So it's a bad lottery to win. And sometimes I feel bitter about it, but, and I think that's okay, because it's okay. I think it would be weird not to feel that way.
I agree. Yeah. I think, you'd be scared to face that. I don't know. It makes a lot of sense. It's probably really brave to say that stuff out loud. It's way easier to just be like, I'm grateful. And, a brave thing is to be like, this sucks and it's not fair. And I feel really bad about it sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel gratitude too, that he had this tumor occurred once. Some kids have 30, 40 surgeries. It's benign, but it can be malignant in place. So it can grow back very easily. And so we're very fortunate there. So there's a lot to be grateful for. But there's,
It's like the
goes
coexisting
both ways.
feelings that's like, this doesn't
Yes.
make any sense. So how is this the way that I'm feeling? So
Yes,
I hear
exactly.
you.
You got it. Very therapeutic to say that out loud, but
Yeah,
it's it is. And it depends on the day. So I'm sure a lot
sure.
of parents in our position, you have days where you're like, we're so blessed. It's a privilege. I do feel that it's a privilege to see this side of life. We saw so many blessings in just even the beginning stages of how things aligned to help us through that time. But and it was helpful, and kind of going back to your question about what got us through, this is one other little tidbit, is that it was helpful to look for the blessings, whether it was somebody bringing you a meal or just something nice a nurse did, or, just it was helpful to kind of see those blessings, because it made you feel like, okay, this is really hard and really awful, but there's still, we can still find a little glimmer of hope in it. And that was really helpful as well.
Yeah, it's weird when you think about I have to intentionally look for blessings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult concept to get through, but then when you realize, when you practice it, it really helps. And I struggle with anxiety and a little bit of depression, and when I have to physically look for these things, and they do help in the moment, and the more I practice
Mm-hmm.
that, the better it gets. And man, it is hard work
Yeah.
though. But there are things that, when you just chip it away, you just chip away at getting really good at looking for the good things. And then you notice them more. And then you get, just chip away at exercise every once in a while. And then you get really good at that. It's these little things that end up making big differences.
Yeah, it's like a toolkit you develop of of things to kind of help with. It's never going to go away. I mean, there's, it's part of being human is you have emotions, and I'm an anxiety sufferer too, so I completely understand that. But if you can find your toolkit, and so that's where that experience, particularly the early days, kind of was a good life skill to acquire. I don't think I had it quite as much prior, to be able to kind of, even in the darkest moments, take a moment and say, well, this happened and it was kind of good.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Well, Amy, you have so much to be proud of with the foundation that you've created, and you recently got just the most amazing grant. So talk to us a little bit about what your foundation does specifically. And I love that you're working towards making the app more accessible for families. I think that's so cool.
mm-hmm. Thank you. So in 2017, so as I mentioned, my son had a condition called diabetes insipidus, and he has a CYP60I. So it makes it more challenging because his thirst mechanism doesn't work. So he can't judge if his body's dehydrated, because he's not as thirsty as he should be. And conversely, he'll overdrink himself into low sodium. And it was super challenging because we had to go to the lab and get lab work, sometimes 4 times a week. And if you have a 4-year-old and you're taking that child to the lab 4 times a week, and their veins get blown out,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's really hard. And then on the weekends, because there is no way to test for this at home, and on the weekends, we were having to go to the ED if the lab wasn't open and something seemed off. And so it's really challenging. So in my research, I identified a device that's used in hospitals that does, basically a handheld blood analyzer. So it does your basic metabolic panel that everyone goes to LabCorp and gets done a couple times a year. And it would do it on a finger stick. So it's a portable device. It can do it on a finger stick and produce a result in a couple minutes. And it was fairly accurate. So, but also not approved for this use. It's not a home use device, and therefore very expensive because it's not covered by insurance. So we set out to find a way to get it, and we did with the help of Alex's pediatrician at the time, and we raised money to be able to purchase the device. And once we got it home and we started using it, it was so life-changing that we were like, we have to get this for other people. I mean, we didn't have to go to the lab 4 times a week.
Yeah.
We could make adjustments in his medication and his fluids immediately to troubleshoot the situation. So we set out to get the devices for other families, which we have done. And that is where the Raymond A. Wood Foundation was started. So that's how we started, was to work to try. And our original hope was maybe one a year. But by the grace of all the goodwill of the people in our world, we've been able to, we're now up to 25 are out in families. So, and then ultimately, we then discovered, these tumors kind of fall through the cracks in that they're survivable. So that's, instantly is a good thing, theoretically. But the problem is that the survival cost is high, really high. And so, especially in children, and these tumors occur in children and adults. So in children, the impact is lifelong. In adults, they have families and lives and jobs, and then they get diagnosed with this and hope, and treated. And depending on how that treatment outcome is, it could really impact their quality of life moving forward. And there was no voice for these tumors. I didn't feel like there was there wasn't anyone speaking up and saying, okay, we need help. We need more support. There are solutions out there. We need to find them. So we in 2020 really rebuilt the foundation of the foundation. And our mission became really seeking quality of life solutions for hypothalamic pituitary brain tumor survivors. And we still continue to provide the handheld blood analyzers, but we're also now working to develop an at-home sodium meter. And that actually received our partner who is working on the research and development of that project just received a grant for phase 1 development. So we're really excited about that, because that could ultimately be FDA approved for home use, covered by insurance. And then we would develop the app in tandem. So families could then log the information as they get it. The endocrinologist, it could interface with, Epic and those types of EMRs. And so endocrinologists could log in and see, what the testing results are and make adjustments. So that's one of our initiatives, but we're also working on research and then we received a grant, or we were a grantee of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative's Rares One Network. So we are funded for the next 3 years to build a patient-led collaborative research network. And our focus really there is to get patients and doctors, the specialists that treat these patients, into a room in a way and kind of figure out how we can, and I think this is across the board in healthcare, but a lot of these patients are treated by different specialties, but so much slips through the cracks and just, leaves caregivers kind of, lost as to where to look for support or how to help or where to turn next. And so kind of getting the researchers in the room start talking about standards of care, as well as ongoing care and initial treatment. And then also reaching underserved populations, which are critically, unmet needs there. So we also want to be able to reach, because really our main channel of communication is social media, but not everybody is on social media. And, I'm pretty resourced as a caregiver and a mom. We call them cranio kids for craniopharyngioma, and I'm pretty resourced, but there are times where I don't have any clue what to do, or who to call, or so to not have even, to not have access to research or those answers, we need to try to be able to provide that support to those families. So that is where we are. So it's evolved quite quickly over the last couple of years, and it certainly personally gives me a lot of hope for Alex, because I think we're making some good progress. And for, all the survivors who are faced with ongoing challenges, we're making good progress, and I feel hopeful for the future, particularly in this tumor.
You make me feel hopeful, honestly, just listening to how My dad always says, if you see a hole, fill it. And that's what you're doing. You found a gap here. How can we fix this? How can we, it's so inspirational. And I can't help but think it's, Alex he's the common denominator that got this ball
Mhm.
rolling, and what an amazing kid he is. And I have just one more question for you. And I would love for you to talk to us about, what is Alex like? What are his favorite things? And then if you could tell us, one of the things he's taught you since you've become his mom, what would that be?
Wow. Yeah. So Alex is probably I mean, I don't know a kid like him, and I'm not even just saying that because I'm his mom. People, I think many people would echo that. Alex is such a empathetic person. He loves people. He loves his family fiercely. I think he calls both of his grandmothers every single day.
Oh.
um, he is just like, he'll collect and he'll sit there and he'll be like, I'm so thankful, Mom, because I love my Aunt Debbie, both my Aunt Debbies. I love Nana. I love Grandma. Like, he inventories his love. It's just the sweetest thing. He is always looks at me and says, Mommy, thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you as a mom. Like, his gratitude. I mean, this kid could
Oh.
be the, he's the poster child of the gratitude movement. Because he always is very thankful. And I worry, he was diagnosed so young that this is the life he knows. So while there's a lot of challenges that come with a younger diagnosis, the one thing that I think is a blessing is that he was too young to have remembered life before, and this is kind of what it is, and he rolls with it. Alex loves arts and crafts. He loves seashells. We live at the beach, so he loves to go look hunting for seashells. Um, he loves talking about sea animals, and dolphins are his favorite. He loves, his favorite dolphin was Winter the dolphin from Clearwater, who passed away a couple weeks ago. So we're super sad, but she was in Dolphin Tail and she had a prosthetic tail. And so she was a really good inspiration for him. We read her story all the time in the beginning months after his surgery. But Alex is just, he has a magnetism and people really gravitate towards him. He loves talking with adults. He struggles a little with his peers. That's kind of a common situation, particularly with survivors of these tumors. But he just inspires me every day because he's so optimistic. He doesn't complain about the things he puts up with, and he's constantly dealing with things hurt, or he's cold, or his hands are cold, or just weird things that I don't know what his brain is telling him, but he still manages to find all the good in it. And that, I think, is really inspiring. And he's just always so grateful for everyone that is around him and the simple things. We're not getting him an Xbox for Christmas, or he doesn't want any of that. He wants to be with family. He wants to be around the people he loves, and that's what he enjoys. And he's 11, and I appreciate that because it's really special.
He's figured out like what we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah.
That family is what matters, and that it's the time you spend together, and that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, sometimes we're like, oh, let's go here, let's do this. And he'll be like, I just want to see my family. And, it's like, let's dial it back, Mom.
Yeah.
And just keep with the simple, important things. And I love that because I think we're all, post-COVID and everything, we're all sort of having to dial ourselves back a little, like during that experience and now moving back into normal life. But, no, I worry so much for him in the future, but sometimes I'm like, he's going to be fine because it's really his perspective. And if he is happy, then I'm happy. And that's, it's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of Alex and a lot of you and what's motivated you and just for being so honest as we talk today. I really appreciate it. And I know there's going to be another parent who hears this and feels validated and heard and seen because of what you've shared. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the work that you're doing because it is really important for families and parents, especially new in this journey, to know, they're not alone. And you can come out from the other side.
Right? You are a living testament to that. And if people want to follow along with your foundation or follow along with you on social media, as you said, how can they do that?
Sure. So on Instagram, it's at rawoodfound. Our website is rawoodfoundation.org. And I'm Amy M. Wood on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. We're on all of them. But we're always posting content on YouTube, like resource videos, educational videos, and things for families that are in our brain tumor journey, but can definitely translate across other diagnosis and illness journeys with children.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to share all of that. Well, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much as well. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.